I've just read an unsettling report in The Independent. It's a paper I most often quote online. And basically, I won't read out the whole report this time because it's a bit too lengthy and it's not the main issue I want to get at. But basically, there's been a Jewish schoolgirl in London, 17-year-old. It's supposedly a top independent school. It's a North London collegiate school, girls only. This girl was apparently told by a teacher she wasn't familiar with that she would send her to one of your gas chambers as a punishment because the girl jumped a queue. Now, it hasn't named the teacher, it hasn't named the girl, yeah. The schools apparently sought legal advice as to what the best response should be. If this is true, I have to say there isn't concrete evidence that this did happen. If it is true, as another teacher, I think there's absolutely no way that teacher should be in a job. Joke or not, there's no way they should be in a job coming out with a comment like that. And just for the record, I'd be saying exactly the same if it was a tasteless comment about a Muslim student or a Sikh student or a Christian student. It's absolutely unprofessional, it's bigoted, it's discriminatory if the claim is true. I see no reason why it wouldn't be, because unfortunately anti-Semitism is widespread in society. I'm not saying it's at endemic levels, but it is definitely there. And I find it troubling in itself that there's a lot of people that are coming on there and say, oh, how do we know it's true, it's probably made up, etc. Well, apparently there were witnesses to this incident, so it's not just the girl's word. Apparently other students witnessed this incident. And I don't accept any sort of excuses that it's just a bad joke or something like that, because this is just, there's no rational excuse for a professional person to make that sort of statement to a student. Really, there's not. And like I say, I'd be saying exactly the same if it was a joke about a Muslim student or a Christian student, Sikh student, Hindu student, whatever. It's bullying, it crosses a line, just no. Anyway, the point I want to get to is, it really bugged me that when I was looking through the comments, a number of them were just condemning it and saying it's unprofessional and so on. But what struck my attention was quite a number of those comments had the audacity to bring up the Palestinian issue. So what you have here is a girl reported to be discriminated against in London, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, it did happen, right? You have that situation. She's being discriminated against in a very vile way, and you have people bringing up a conflict thousands of miles away that's utterly irrelevant to this particular situation. It's not like it was a girl demonstrating, with an Israeli flag or something like that. It was a girl in London discriminated on the grounds of her religion. And yet you have people bringing up the Palestinian issue. They were coming out with things like, oh well, we don't condone what happened, but look at the way the Israelis treat the Palestinians, etc, etc, etc. This really bothers me, and I like to sort of lay out the reasons why. I've mentioned this before about why I feel that Israel is massively vilified in a way that is disproportionate. And I want to be careful how I word this, because whenever you weigh into the Israel-Palestine issue, it's very easy to be misunderstood, and there's strong opinions on both sides. I may as well say I staunchly believe in Israel's right to exist. It's there, it's not going anywhere, and people who have a problem with that are deluded, because it is not going anywhere. That's just something to work with from the start. I believe that, and that's my position. Israel's there, it is not going. The second thing I'd like to say is I'm not a blind sycophant of the state of Israel. What I mean by that, in fact, it's probably the wrong adjective to use, because sycophant refers to people. What I'm trying to say is that I don't believe that Israel's above criticism. And in no video have I ever made that point. I've never said that Israel can never be criticised, or there isn't serious problems in terms of the way Israel's managed or taken approach to this conflict. Israel does have blood on its hands, it does. But my question would be, name one country that doesn't. My question to these people who are vilifying Israel, look at your own country and ask yourselves honestly, is my country innocent? Is my country blood free? And I guarantee in 90% of those cases the answer will be no. So when I see Europeans or Americans who hate Israel coming out and condemning and vilifying Israel, I think the hypocrisy is incredible. And the same applies to Arabs who do it. But in the case of the Arabs, it's quite often based on the fact, I don't think it's legitimate concern for Palestinian welfare, because actually there's a lot of discrimination against Palestinians in Arab states, something that's never reported, but there is. No, I don't think it's concern for the Palestinians. I think it's more to do with the fact that the Arab media is massively biased against the state of Israel. Because the Arab media has a political agenda. It doesn't believe that Israel has a right to exist. Therefore, it's a classic tale. If you vilify a country enough, then people will grow up hating it. And Arab children are brought up to hate Israel. Arab children as far away as Morocco, Algeria, even in other Islamic states outside the Arab world, for example Bangladesh, Indonesia, you get intense anti-Israel sentiments. Now this strikes me as curious, and I'll try and explain why. I'm by no means trivialising the Palestinian issue. It is a grim place. There's some serious suffering that goes on there. I'm not pretending there isn't. But what I resent is that these people seem to callously ignore other conflicts, because they're so blinded by their hatred of Israel that, I'll give you an example, 150,000 dead Syrians in 3 years of bloody civil war. Why is it those Syrians are seemingly less important than Palestinians? Now, by all accounts, the number of Palestinians that have died in this conflict with Israel over the last decade is perhaps 10,000. It's a lot of people, but it's not as many as the Syrians. It's not as many as those killed in South Sudan. It's not as many as those killed in Nigeria. It's not as many as those killed in the DRC. It's not as many as some reports of Rohingya Muslims killed in Burma in a much shorter space of time. So I'm not saying the Palestinian issue should be ignored, but I do question why there is so much media attention given to it. I do question that. And people are so stupid that they come on and say, oh, why no attention to the Palestinians? The exact opposite is true. There's disproportionate attention to the Palestinians. Disproportionate in the sense that there's much bigger conflicts that don't get reported to the same extent. I'm guessing more Yemenis have been killed in the numerous conflicts going on there over the past decade than have been Palestinians killed. And by the way, many of the Palestinian deaths have been at the hands of other Palestinians, i.e. the Hamas-Fatah internal conflict. Now Israel has blood on its hands, but in all the recent conflicts I have seen Israel go out of its way to try and minimise Palestinian casualties. Now, I won't use the term collateral damage. I don't like that term, because a life is a life, But unlike Hamas, Israel does not go into the Palestinian territories and deliberately target men, women and children. Yes, men, women and children die because it's a densely populated area, but quite often that's because the people who fire rockets into Israel hide among civilians. And the fact that these issues are completely ignored by those who hate Israel just says to me, how much of a lack of objective those people have. There's another point I'd like to mention. I'm not a theologian. I don't claim to be an expert on the history of the Holy Land. But I don't think you have to be a theologian to recognise that there have been Jews in the Holy Land for thousands of years. Going back to the Kingdom of Israel, back to King David, back to way back, there have been Jews in the Holy Land. So when people talk about the Jews invading Palestinian land, that seems to me to be a massive distortion. Now I concede I need to look a lot more into the issue of how this whole conflict began, but I genuinely don't think that is necessarily the most important issue today. The most important issue today is sustainable peace, right? And I fully acknowledge that both sides have blood on their hands. I'm not saying Israel's completely innocent. I'm not saying that. And I want to make that very clear, because people will no doubt brand me as someone who basically defends Israel without looking at any critique. That's not true. I'm not saying Israel is above criticism, and I do condemn any sort of legislation, for example, that says, apparently in Canada recently, there's legislation to ban criticism of Israel. If that's true, it's wrong and it's stupid. Nevertheless, I think the disproportionate criticism definitely goes against Israel in terms of how this conflict is reported, because there's definitely a disproportionate amount of attention given to this conflict. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is it much bigger conflicts are overlooked? I mean, why is it that Indonesians care more about Palestinians, let's say 8,000 miles away, than they do about Rohingya Muslims just to the north? It doesn't make sense to me. It's like the entire Islamic world, and I'm making a generalization here, but it seems to me the entire Islamic world cares more about the Palestinians than they do about repression of Muslims around the world, or Christians, or any other group. I mean, the Kurds have suffered just as much as the Palestinians, if not more, and their issue is hugely overlooked. The Rohingya have suffered enormously. In Burma, the UN is calling this a crime against humanity. So why is it these blowhards who hate the state of Israel are not concerned about that? The point I'm making is there seems to be a massive inconsistency among those who criticise Israel. And it's that inconsistency I want to scrutinise and challenge. So, going back to the original report, that issue in London had absolutely nothing to do with this conflict, but these reactionary morons come on and use the Palestinian issue as an excuse to vent their blatant anti-Semitism. And it troubles me. I'm not Jewish, but it does trouble me that so many people will use that as an excuse to vent their blatant hatred of the Jews. Some people say, criticising Israel isn't the same as criticising the Jews. Well, it shouldn't be, but the problem is, more often than not, it does descend into that. If you look a bit deeper into some of the people who vilify Israel, if you look a bit deeper into their background, you'll see that in many cases they actually are just Jew haters. I'm not saying that to shock. Just look into their background. You know, I used to be among them. I used to be someone who thought, oh, look at the way Israel behaves, look at the way they treat the Palestinians. But I then realised, let's think about this for a minute. Israel is surrounded by states that are hostile to it. Now, what other country in the world would be expected to put up with what Israel puts up with in terms of the never-ending barrage of rocket attacks, and in the Intifada stage, suicide bombings? Israelis could not go down the street without wondering if they would be blown up in a cafe, in a nightclub, you name it. And yes, I'm fully aware that thousands of Palestinians have been killed. But more often than not, it's been because of the callous, selfish behaviour of Hamas, who don't give a shit about Palestinian casualties. These are people who put AK-47s in the hand of 5-year-olds as propaganda. So there's not much more I want to say, really. I'll just conclude with this. I have never said that Israel is above criticism. You can brand me that way if you want. I've never said that. But I do question why those who vilify the state of Israel don't seem to have a consistency in their supposed values for human rights and repression. It's obsessive, it's disproportionate, and I find it troubling because I think it covers something else.